Hello, Eric from Astrology for Awakening, and we're talking about cutting through the drama with Mercury squared Pluto. Mercury is the mind. It's the capacity of consciousness itself to reflect upon experience and to name experience. Maybe you remember the story from the Bible of the first human, Adam, which is symbolically the first emergence of this reflective consciousness. And one of the first experiences that's recounted in the story is the naming of the creatures. Adam watches the arising of the patterns, of the forms of existence, and names them. And this is one of the functions of the mercurial capacity, which is to recognize form and to give it a name, because there's power in naming. You know this from the fairy tales of your childhood. In the fairy tales, there's often this moment where the person who's in danger learns the name of the gnome or the goblin or the demon. Knowing the name gives them power. And this is a symbol of the way consciousness operates, and it's reformulated in the language of the times currently in terms of neurobiology and the research on self-reflection, a mercurial function, and self-regulation. They use the phrase, name it to tame it. Name it to tame it. And they're speaking about this practice of naming the creatures, the emotions that arise up in powerful ways that can be overwhelming. But this naming, this mercurial naming function gives us some space, and we'll talk more about that. Now, the razor's edge, of course, with Mercury always is that there's the possibility for the mind to fall under the spell of its own stories, to begin to believe its own narratives, and to confuse the maps that the mind creates, its representations, for the territory, which is the immediacy of experience itself. And Pluto is related to that immediacy. It's the capacity of consciousness to be profoundly present, so present that it can die and be reborn. Pluto is the energy of the deep, relentless evolutionary impulse that has been actively at work since the Big Bang, continually dying and being reborn, continually deconstructing and re-emerging in new forms of expression and existence, forms that have greater complexity and greater depth. Depth is a key word for Pluto. Pluto is the lord of the underworld, of the deep energies of nature, of the soul. So there's this deep, fierce, evolutionary power, and it's an uncompromising force that is ever active, but is held back often by culture and by conditioning, by our narratives. Now, the mystical schools, the shamanic schools, the tantric schools, our own Kriya Yoga tradition at Wisdom Heart, these are schools that honor, bow to, and begin to relate in generative and healthy ways to both Mercury, the mind, and to this power, this Kundalini, this Shakti, this deep Plutonian energy. Now, the current aspect that we're dealing with today is the 90-degree aspect, the square aspect. This happens several times a year as the planet Mercury is in a quick orbit. Pluto moves very slowly, and it creates several times a year where the mind gets into this square aspect with the depths, where there's a moment of crisis, as it were, between our individual story and the soul's deep impulse and desire to transform and to reawaken. So both of these energies, the Mercury and the Pluto, they are both permutations or emanations of consciousness itself, and both are essential for our soul's awakening. It's our job to work with both and to discover how at each phase of their relationship there's a Dharma door that is opening to us. The square aspect is kind of a crisis moment, a moment where the old map can no longer be held onto. It needs to be let go, even if it's going to be torn out of our hands. We don't have to have it be that way. The old narrative, the old symbols are dying. And the old symbol, whether it's individually, the symbols and the story, particularly, by which I've been able to sustain a sense of coherence, a sense of permanence, a narrative, that is dying. And that is also happening collectively. The story by which we have entranced ourselves and created a sense of permanence and continuity is dying. And it's rare for this death process to be welcomed, with opened arms, unless we have been initiated into the value of dying and being reborn, unless we have made that inner commitment to step on the path and to make a profound prioritization of seeing the truth over being reassured that we got it right. We've got it partially right. Pluto is coming to say there's a bigger story to be included. Something is knocking on the door of our own consciousness. Something is seeking to break through from the depths, and it will break through. The hard way or the easy way, it will break through because it is inexorable, it's relentless, and it is eternally patient. The pressure will build and it will break through. This primal force is powerful. This primal force is more powerful than the surface narrative mind, but it does not have that reflective consciousness. It does not have that naming power, and thus it does not know how to translate a mercurial function itself into a new story that can become a guiding light, a source of wisdom, a source of clarity in the midst of the challenges of everyday life. It's raw, it's powerful, it's just life itself. And it needs this relationship with the artful language of Mercury if it is going to become integrated into a new story, a new myth, personally or collectively, into a new symbol that can be our guiding light as we move to the next stage of our awakening. So this practice is turning the mercurial curiosity and openness and fascination, even eagerness and a willingness to learn towards the energy of the depths that are emerging. And a beautiful practice is journaling for this. It's a pure Mercury practice. It requires paper, it requires a pen or a screen, but it requires the instruments of Mercury himself for stepping down, as it were, the intensity of this square into a constructive and reflective dialogue between the narrative mind and the depths. One of the great ways to do this is to journal your dreams, to write them down daily, in the middle of the night, to write them down, to say, I'm paying attention, I'm receiving the message, writing it down, unexpurgated, writing it out, to journal to those depths, speaking unto it, speaking unto the depths, the feelings that are emerging, the emotions that are emerging, the thoughts that are emerging, to dialogue, you write a line and let the depths write through your hand. That's bringing the Mercury function and the deep primordial energies together. We can also look outside in our external life and notice who are the people, what are the events, what are the things that are showing up in this time, particularly those who are pushing our buttons, our rage buttons, our resentment buttons, our blame, our guilt, our conflict, our power struggle buttons. Who are those people, events, and things? Who are those people, events, and things that are drawing us into a drama? You may be finding yourself revisiting an old drama, the old drama resurfacing with some familiar foe, I'll call it. It's really our teacher, but it's in the form of a foe. Or maybe you're finding it's the same old drama, but now there's a new foe, a new costume through which we can engage with this repetitive structure. Because Pluto brings up the same deep lessons again and again because they're deep. We often don't get them the first time around. The purpose of the repetition is not to be annoying, not to be finger wagging. It's more like a recurring dream because there's a message that's trying to be delivered from the unconscious mind to the conscious mind. Remember in the Talmud, they said the uninterpreted dream is like an unread letter. An unread letter is an unheeded message. It's an incomplete communication. And so it repeats and repeats. In our common parlance, it's unfinished business that comes to the surface. And what is that? It's whatever has been pushed down into the depths, what's ever been excluded from our old narrative, particularly those aspects of our psyche that we've been conditioned to deem as taboo, like uncouth, even unspiritual. And there's a lot of spiritual conditioning out there that's telling us to, push down and deny and not to include in our awakening story these primal energies, but they will not be denied. Pluto and the urges to power, to control, the sexuality, the energies of anger, of dominance, these can be resurfacing, but maybe they were surfacing as those others, as those pets, those people, events, and things. And they're coming at us in often less than skillful ways because they're seeking to be mirrors, to invite us to turn around in consciousness and to pay attention to the unredeemed aspects of the soul. They're rising up to be seen, to be known, to be blessed, and to be reintegrated or integrated into a more profound, more complex, and a deeper story. Remember, that's the evolutionary process. Greater complexity and greater depth through including that which has been denied. So you can do a journal process between you and those pets. You don't have to necessarily talk to them first. You might do it just to the pets because they are as much outside as inside. Those who are arising as an expression of this Mercury Pluto tension, conflict. The word is drama. Journal the drama. Step back and journal it as if you were watching a play from the balcony. Get up on the balcony and describe the drama. Getting up on the balcony is a beautiful phrase, a modern phrase for this practice that I learned from at a conference we were presenting at. Harvard professor Marty Linsky, who teaches at the Kennedy School, and he teaches leaders to get up on the balcony. This is what the wisdom traditions have called taking the witness position, what we might more colloquially call getting some space or getting some perspective. So we practice noticing the drama from the balcony and beginning to see that there is an underlying structure to every drama, and that structure is universal. It was beautifully, beautifully articulated by Dr. Stephen Karpman back in the 70s. He's a psychologist, and he noticed that despite the variations on the surface of the presenting problems and conflicts that his clients were struggling to resolve, there was an underlying structure that was consistent. And it was composed of 3 archetypal roles. Every drama has them. And he called the roles the victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor. And as we're in this Mercury squared Pluto time, and as this tendency is for dramas to arise, notice the roles of victim, rescuer, persecutor. We know the victim hides out. Get away, save me, it's not my fault. The persecutor is the one who moves against danger. You did this. Why are you doing this? To fight or to blame or to criticize. The rescuer always moves towards the challenge, but moves towards it in a different way to smooth things. It's okay. Soothe things over, dial the temperature down. And there's emotions that are associated with these roles. The victim feels the emotions of powerlessness, of hopelessness, of being ashamed, of shame, and of a sense of it'll never get better. The persecutor is fueled by anger, madness, impatience, bitterness, even fury. And the rescuer tends to feel guilty, sad, subtly or not so subtly resentful and burned out. I can't take it anymore. So this is the drama triangle, Karpman calls it, of these 3 roles, and that we rotate through these roles, sometimes in a matter of minutes when we're in a conversation, and sometimes in a matter of seconds when we're in our own head, because it happens as much interpersonally as it happens intrapersonally. I know that I can start out in the victim, why is this happening to me? Switch into the persecutor, who do they think they are? Then switch to the rescuer, I need to make this right in some way. The first step, and this is where we get into the sacred symbolism of Mercury Pluto, the first step is to get off the drama triangle by recognizing you are on it. And this can be tricky because the pervasive energy of Mercury Pluto, when it's not made conscious, is to point the finger, to blame, to be self-righteous. But we each have a role, and we usually have all 3 of them. And this is where the awakened Pluto-Mercury energy comes in. That awakened energy in the traditions is called the sword of discernment. Manjushri in the east, the angel Michael in the west, carries the razor-sharp sword of discernment that unflinchingly cuts through our self-protective stories, our narratives of victimization, of self-righteousness, in order to liberate. The sword of discernment is fashioned in the molten fires of Pluto. That's this beautiful combination. And the square is meant to help us cut through decisively our attachments, our identification with an old story, and to liberate us to receive a new and powerful vision. Of course, we can see it sometimes in an instant of the cut, but integration might take some time. And that's particularly important now because Mercury is about to go retrograde. So it's about to turn back and retrace its path, which will likely give us several opportunities to revisit the ways that we cling to our outmoded stories and identities, and to again and again remember to pull out the loving, compassionate, razor-sharp sword of discernment and to cut through those identifications with the clarity of loving awareness, so that we can, with equanimity, with compassion, and with humbleness, open up to rewrite, to revise, to give rebirth to a more empowering story that can guide us deeper into our true lives.